All right, so we're going to be working on new site 6 today. As I just mentioned, just to reiterate, I have some extra changes here from earlier in lecture where we added some refactoring for our searching and added like the context in there, just to get familiar with context. But other than that, this is everything that was completed in new site 5 and prior to that. All right, so let's take a look at our app to make sure we are familiar with what we added in new site 5. If you recall, we added an add article button, and that should take us to the add article page. If I click on that, we should have a page that looks similar to this, where we can add a title, byline, abstract, click add article, and that should make a post request to the server. If you remember, post requests are used for creating resources on the server end, whereas get requests are just requesting resources, usually just HTML pages. So yeah, when I hit add article, that should add an article. We'll test that out. It's actually probably not going to work, but I just remember. We also added a login page. So I click login. Login page, pretty straightforward. Just enter an email password. Currently, there's no functionality here. This should not say add article. That is my bad. So login page, that should say login, not add article. Sorry about that. You guys can fix that too. So you type in an email password. Currently, we only just print out to the console. So let's make sure that's wired up and still working. Not sure what this warning is. I'm just going to hide that warning. Input element should autocomplete. Suggest current password. All right, I guess this is something from React Bootstrap. I'm not going to worry about that warning or hints or whatever it's trying to tell me. Is that an info? Verbose? It's verbose. All right, get that out of there. All right, so now, why is that saying that? All right. Excuse my extra code here. Don't look at this. All right, so I do have some issues I need to flesh out that we'll have to deal with. So refresh my page. All right, cool. So if I log in with, let's say, something at other.com, password would be Platoon. Hit login. We wire this up so we are currently printing out to the console when we hit the login button. So we are capturing the user values. So something at other.com and Platoon. That's where we're at right now. What we're going to do today with new site 6 is add the capability to actually log in. So let's take a look at our Readme, make sure we quickly understand what we're doing. So new site part 6, we're going to use the context API, which we covered before lunch. We're going to add a login button, it looks like, to app nav. So similar to how we have, I guess we already added the login, didn't we? I don't know if that was new site 5, but did we add a login button for new site 5?
Yeah, for new site 5, but it's not functional, it just prints.
Okay, but we did add the button to app nav and the page. Like, I know we added the page. Okay, I'm not sure why they asked us to add the login link, but maybe if you didn't, you could add it again or add it this time. So now our third requirement here, we only want to show the add article link when a user is logged in.
Excuse me, Ankur?
Yep.
I think what they're saying is it should show login, but then it should be log out. Maybe they're just kind of like letting you know.
Gotcha. Yes, I guess I should read the entire sentence. Thank you. So modify appNav to show login if the user's logged in, if the user's not logged in, or a log out link if the user is logged in. Okay, thank you, Tanya. So there is something we still need to do here because we're always showing log in right now. Where'd it go? Right here. It always says log in, but if they're actually logged in, we need them to want a button that says log out. Makes sense. Okay, so that's something we'll need to do. And then the third thing, we only want to show the add article link when a user is logged in and include the user's access token to the now protected add article API call. So this is something that's changed in the server between new site 5 and new site 6. If we do this right now, let's actually do it. So if I go to add article, let's add a new article. I'm going to let's get rid of this. A new article is The Lion King by Disney. The Lion King was an excellent movie. All right, so if I try to add this article, let's see what happens. Well, I clicked it. Nothing's happening. Does my console have anything for me? Yep, looks like I have an error there. That's it's not what I want. So every time I clicked it, it's this. For that, if I click this again, looks like I got an error. And notice the type of response I got from the server. It's not a 404 error. So 404 code stands for resource not found, meaning it didn't know where I was trying to go to. In this case, I'm going to a valid endpoint as one that, meaning one that exists on the server. However, it says I am not authorized. I am unauthorized to make this sort of request. So that is something we're going to be fixing here. So again, the server changed between version 5, sorry, new site 5 and new site 6. This new site 6 server is requiring that we be logged in or authenticated before we can add an article. So that's what our site is now. Anyone can view articles. I can still go to my homepage, still see all our articles and read them. Still go to sections, but I cannot add content unless I am logged in to this site. That is the new requirement that has been set up. So let's get to that. Looking at the README initial setup. So again, you can copy over your new site 5 changes or just use the ones we've provided. So long as you understand that there are a couple issues. One, the login button says add article. And then I think there's one other issue that you might have to clean up. Anyway, all right, user API login. So far, we've only utilized blah, blah, blah. Ignore this. I don't think update app's going to work. So there's no test files need. Okay, so we're going to create a new file called users API. So that's what I'm picking out here. And that's going to take in, that's going to have a method called login and take in a credentialed object. So some sort of object that has data in it. The structure will look like this. So email and password. One thing I want to mention, this particular login right here is the actual login we're going to be using. These are hard coded into the server, so we can't really create logins at this point. That is outside the scope of today's goals, but we've created some dummy logins, and the exact login is going to be john@doe.com. The password is going to be open sesame, all lowercase. All right, so let's get started with the users API login method. So I'm going to go to my API folder that we had before with our articles API. I'm going to create a new file and call it users API as they directed us, .js. In here, what do I want to do? I want to create a method. So const login, as the README said, it's going to take a credentials object. Again, you can name this whatever you want. It's just a variable. That arrow function, and then we'll do something here. Not sure what yet. Then we need to export out of here. So export default login. That's correct syntax. I'm not the greatest with the syntax here, so export default. Yeah, that looks correct. Okay, so as mentioned, this is going to take in a login or credentials object. It's going to be a post request made to localhost 3001 API users. Okay, so I'm just gonna do what they asked me to. I'm a little fuzzy on this. So let's create a const variable, base URL. Call it base user. As always, if you guys have a question, please ask. Just tap in that URL. So looks like that. All right, we'll confuse myself. All right, so the URL here is base URL. Why is it not picking that up? There it is. Plus, it looks like question mark, include equal user. Is that what they had? They had /login include user. Okay, /login include user. So that's going to be our base plus the extra stuff. I'm going to hop over to Articles API. So this is something I kind of snuck in between one of the versions. But I created a function called try catch fetch, which is basically wrapping any of my API fetch calls with a try and catch. That's just to kind of make it easier for all my other methods, so they don't all have to have try catches. Just makes it easier to write code for me. So I'm going to reuse this try catch fetch by creating a new file. And you guys do know how to do this. You guys probably have maybe a different version. So here I'm just going to call it base API. I don't know what else to call it. Base API will have that try catch fetch that I will export. Export default try catch fetch. I like the name of it too. All right, so this is just, again, making a fetch call. It's an async function. We get a response, and then we await the JSON response. So it's basically what we're doing before, but wrapped in a try catch. That's all it's doing here. If we do get an error, I'm returning null from this function. So that's something to keep in mind. So now let's get rid of try catch fetch, doing some refactoring so we could reuse some code. So we need to import something here now. Import try catch fetch from base API. All right, hopefully that works. If not, we'll fix it. All right, try catch fetch. So now that I have try catch fetch, I can create an init object, and I'm going to copy this from Oracle's API also. So we had a post, right? When we're adding an article, we're doing a post. So the init structure, this is everything extra that we add, will look like that. So I'm going to copy that. I'm a little lazy / being efficient. So I'm creating an object. I'm calling it init. This is going to have our headers like before. Our method is going to be post. Remember that we are posting in this case. And then we're going to have a body. In this case, we're getting a credentials object that's going to be our body. So make sure we copy and paste and update appropriately. Any questions on the refactoring I'm doing right now? Looks like we have an error, so let's take a look at that. Try catch fetch is not exported from base API. We'll just do export without default. All right, always weird on exporting syntax, but cool. All right, so we should have access to try catch fetch here. So we have our URL. We have this init object. Now we call try catch fetch. So that's going to be return. Oh, this should be async, right? Async. Return await, because we can't use await outside of the async function. Try catch fetch. Pass in the URL and the init object. Just to make sure you understand.
Ankur, can we see your try catch fetch a
Yeah.
little bit? I'm still like having it separated is a little bit confusing.
Yeah, so basically just 2 params. So remember, when we're making a GET request, all we need is a URL for fetch. When we're making a POST request or anything a little more advanced than GET, we need to provide an object. In this case, I'm calling this object init. Again, the reason I chose that name was because of documentation. Fetch API. You could name it whatever you want. But if you look at the fetch API documentation, they tell you the inputs, I think, somewhere, fetch. Yeah, so fetch takes in a resource, which we're calling URL, and then an optional init parameters. That's going to contain your method, your headers, your body. I guess there's also mode, credentials, maybe cache. I don't know what a lot of these do, but there's stuff we can include in that object. So that's why I chose the name init, just to kind of match what they're using here. Again, we don't have to, but yeah, let's take a look at try catch fetch again. Just making a fetch request, awaiting that response, and then awaiting the conversion to JSON. Because this JSON method is also asynchronous. That's something that kind of confused me earlier, but processing the response and converting to JSON is just an asynchronous process because it could take some time. Okie doke. So again, just to look at my login method one more time, we take in a credentials object. We're going to this URL because that's where they tell us to send us our request. Our init method is going to be a post. We're going to stringify that credentials object in the body, and then we're just going to await the try catch fetch results and return.
You're going to end up with double slashes in your URL.
Thank you so much. So my base should not have a flash. Thanks, James, for catching that. So I probably would have missed that and spent 2 hours on that. Okay, thank you. And okay, so that looks good. Let's make sure our app's running still. Cool. Everything looks good. Let's continue on. So going back to our README, we created our login. There's a unit test. Again, I don't think we wired up the unit test. Ignore anything about testing. We'll probably need to clean up this README. Okay, so now we have our API. We have our data, right? Our login page is wired up correctly from Site 5, where we're getting our credentials object. Let's actually hook those up together. So I'm going to go to my login page. That's under source, pages, login page. All right, so we should have a form. We have a method that's going to be called when we submit this form. In this case, it's called handle submit form. Takes an event. We want to prevent default. Again, this is because by default, a form submission is going to refresh the page. We don't want to refresh the page. So this prevent default is going to prevent that refresh. Then we are constructing a login object or credentials object, what do you want to call it? Grabbing the values from the form and then printing out to the console. But now we want to actually call that API. So we're going to import users API. VS Code knew where that was, so made my life a little easier. And now we could call users API, login, pass in the login object or credentials object, whatever you named it. And that should give us a response back. So let response equals users API login response. Now, again, keep in mind this is an asynchronous call, right? If you remember looking at users API, this is an async function. So we're going to need to wait on that some more in our login page. So here, I need to make this in the waits. Anyone see an issue right now? Look good to you?
Async on line 9.
Yep. You almost got it. You cannot use an await keyword outside of an async function. Right now, this is a synchronous function. The async keyword makes it an asynchronous function, meaning it's going to, I don't think we talked about this, but JavaScript at its core is a synchronous language. This async functionality is kind of simulating async behavior. There's a lot of details behind the scenes, but again, just to point that out. All right, so we're getting a response. If response, let's actually take a look at what that response object looks like. So let's do a console log. Let's see what we're getting back. I might call that data. I don't know what to call it. Data maybe. Sure. All right, so let's see if this actually works or if we wired up something incorrectly. I'm going to save this. Cool. Server seems happy. Let's go to the login page. Login. All right. So again, we have a hard-coded login for you. If you want to add your own login, you can. You don't have to, but if you actually, we don't recommend that you go into the server because you don't need to modify anything there. But if you actually go to the news server, this is where your server is actually running from, like all the code for it. Open that up. Go to the server folder. There's a boot folder. Inside of that, there's a sample models.js folder. If you open that up, this is where we have those sample hard-coded logins. We actually have 3 of them. We have John, Jane, and Bob at doe.com, or I guess Bob is at projects.com. I don't know why he gets different URL, but they all have the same password. Pretty insecure here, but whatever. But you guys can probably add your own login if you want. Nothing's stopping you, but again, you don't have to. Again, don't really tinker too much with the server because I don't even know what it's doing, but it works. Okay, we're going to use the built-in login. So let's try to log in with a bad login. So let's go with encore at doe.com. Password will be pop-up Platoon. So this login does not exist. Let's see what errors we get. Login. Okay, so notice we got an actual error, unauthorized. That's interesting. But we also got an error. Login failed is our error. I guess there's not much detail here, but we could kind of surmise that this is probably a bad login. I was expecting maybe a little bit more here, but that's fine. So let's see. We got an error, so we do if data.error. Again, I'm just using the data we get returned. So there's an error object or error entry in my object. So I do error.message. That should tell me login failed. So if I do if error, then let's get lazy and just do an alerts. So alert will be data.error.message because that is something I saw on the return message. Else, we'll assume that there's no error object. We're just going to assume that login was successful. I don't know if that's necessarily safe, but I think it's fine enough. So else, login successful. Any questions? All right, so if we logged in, I don't know, what do we have out there? Brian Slusher, what should we do if we log in successfully? Any ideas?
My guess would be give you an alert saying login was successful and take you to the home page.
Perfect. Sounds good to me. So let's say log in successfully. Hopefully these alerts don't get too annoying. Successfully. And then Brian said navigate to the homepage. Yep, that's usual default functionality once you log in. You don't want to just sit there. So here we can navigate. We're going to use that use navigate hook, our good old friend. Again, this is functionality from the React router. So we have const navigate. That's going to come from use navigate. I can type it correctly. Navigate. All right, that got imported automatically for me, I believe. So we have that.
Isn't the Ankur, isn't the alert going to be kind of annoying because when you log in, it's going to take you to the page and then you're going to have to click out of it?
Yeah, we can take it off. Let's just keep it in for now. But I agree, alerts get annoying real quick. Navigate. Where do you want to go to? We want to go to the home page. So that's the route for the home page, if you guys remember. So that should, if we're successful, we should be taking the home page after we see an annoying alert. If we see an error, or if we get an error from login, we should see this message. So let's check this out again. Let's try a bad password or a bad login again. encore@do.com. Password, whatever, login. Okay, oops, we got an error, login failed. That's cool. Let's try a valid password or a valid login. So it's John@do. Again, this is hard coded. Open Sesame is the password. Now let's see if this is successful or if we have something else going wrong. So hit login. All right, there we go. We got our pop-up, logged in successfully. I hit OK, and we're taken to our homepage. Perfect. Cool. So again, a lot of the server side is done for us. So we're not really doing the full authentication, I guess, spectrum or the full circle of it. The server's already doing all the work for us in terms of authenticating us. It's just sending a response once we make a request with a valid login. I think I should take a slight tangent here. We might have covered this before. I just want to make sure we understand the process that's going on here. So I guess there's one more thing I want to do. Let's print out data if we're successful. Or are we doing that already? We are doing that already. All right. So let's look at our console if it's still there. Yeah, so we got an object back from the server when we logged in. Let's take a look at that object. No, that's not it. There it is. This is the object that returned when we successfully logged in. So there's some data that the server is sending us back. It's not just sending you like, hey, cool, you're validated, go on your way. Looks like it's sending us a created time. It's got this ID with this funky string in it. Well, we're gonna talk about that more in a bit. TTL, I believe that means time to life. No, time. Does anyone know what TTL stands for? Time to something.
Time to live or something like that.
Time to live. Okay, yeah. So there's a certain lifespan for this ID. Well, it's effectively a token. We have, and then we also have this user object, tells us more information about the user. So we have our ID if we need it. We have the actual username. So that's not something we sent in, but that's something the server sent back. We also have the email that we logged in with. Cool. User ID. I don't know why we have two separate user IDs here. Whatever, server sending us some stuff. I'm not going to question it. But let's talk about the authentication process. We might have covered this before during Django authentication. But just as a reminder, what's actually going on here? So client side, that's our application, our web browser, our React app is our client side. The server is the thing in the background that we're sending requests to. So when we are logging in, we send a username and password. The server is going to validate that. So the server has some data, usually in a database with valid username and password combinations. It's going to check if what we're sending in is actually correct. Assuming it is correct, it's going to respond successfully and send a token back. So the reason it sends a token back is so that your client side can store that token and submit that for any requests that require authentication. This is a preferred method rather than always having to log in, right? Imagine logging into Amazon, and then when you want to place an order, you got to type in your username and password again, and then like everything you need to type in your username and password. That's not really user friendly. So in the case this token, instead, this token is cached on your client side and just automatically sent with authenticated request. So again, this is for sure a Django example, but the same process holds with our React app right now. When we make any request, we're going to send a token along with that request. So we'll see how that is achieved here. If you go to our curriculum page, so today is the 3rd, there are some I guess, what I'm trying to go for. Some recommended reading. They talk about token-based authentication. So if you're curious more about that, again, we kind of touched the tip of it. There's obviously many resources that talk a lot more about it. You get a good history of it, yada, yada, yada. You guys can read more about how token authentication works. All right. Also, know that, yeah, token-based authentication isn't the only way to authenticate. Thought this page covers it. All right, there's other ways to authenticate, but you guys can Google at your leisure. There's also JSON web token. We'll be using this more next week. So I guess this is kind of preliminary reading. Yeah, we'll cover this tomorrow. So if you're curious, just read more about authentication. Otherwise, just kind of accept it that stuff's going on. The key thing is that a token's being passed to us. So if I go back to my console, this ID value, that is our token. I would actually prefer this to be called token. So maybe that's changed with making the server. I don't want to mess with the server right now. This is our token. Basically, we authenticate ourselves, and the server was like, all right, cool, I'm going to give you this special token that you can use now to make authenticated requests. All right, so what we need to do is take this token and cache that within our app, because we don't want to keep logging in each time. So now we're going to take this data. Where's that data? Right here. The data we're getting back. We want to do something with it. So what shall we do? I'm going to, let's see what our Readme page says. So, okay, we did this part. We got to store the user object and token using a React context. So we talked about context before lunch. This is another use case for context. The reason being is because a lot of our pages probably want to know like the user information. Like think about Amazon again, like when you go to your orders page or go to your like, your shopping cart, that's all data relevant to your user. So you probably want like, to have that available across your application. So this might be a useful case of context. Again, you don't have to use context, but we're going to go forth with context. So that's our new tool and makes sense in this case. All right, so we're going to get something that looks like this. That looks correct. We are calling that. All right, we're going to create our context. So we did this before. Let's do it one more time. So as I mentioned, my version here has that filter context that we created before lunch for filtering. I'm going to create a new file and call that user context. Context. Not JS. We're going to go through the same steps. So more practice here. So we're going to import, create context, not use context. Let's not make the same mistake twice. So create context from React. Then we want to create a context object. So we'll do const user context equals create context, and then we could pass in some default value. We'll export default user context. All right. Again, we don't need a default value, but I like creating one just to give the developer, whether it be myself or anyone else, an idea of what this context is going to contain inside of it. So here I'm going to create an object. Let default value. We're going to create an object. It's going to have user as an entry, and that could be null. And then what else do we have? So user and a method to set the user. All right, looks like so we're passing a user data and a function to update user. That's interesting. Set user, just gonna be an empty anonymous function that does nothing at all. All right, so that's kind of funky syntax, but again, this is like the most minimal anonymous function you can create that does nothing at all. Okay, and then we want to pass that as a default value, and then we're good to go. So that's step one of creating context. Kevin McGee, you are on my screen. So what's step two of a context here?
You'll use the use context inside the element.
Close. So that's step three.
Oh.
That is consuming. We
Oh,
need to
you
set
gotta
up a provider. So
Okay,
if I
yeah,
go
you got
to-
to set up a provider that's going to be like a parent around the whatever tag is going to use it.
Yep. Yeah. So we need to set up a provider. Again, we could do these out of order. Like everything's got to be wired up eventually. But in this case, I like doing the provider first. So we'll do user context from our context location. And then we're going to wrap, the part of our application that wants user information. This might take some thinking, but I know what I'm intending to do. So I'm going to wrap all of my child nodes. So do user context here, and then close out user context. I'm going to wrap all of my children components. Got to make sure I wrap the right things. Okay, so we go here. This code is being overzealous here, so let's tab this stuff. Sorry. All right, tab that stuff out. All right, so notice we do have nested context here, which is totally fine. We have filter context, which is servicing all the routes. We have user context that's servicing all the routes and app nav. And you'll see why we want to do this. I kind of thought ahead, but user context needs a value. That value is going to be something. Well, what is that something is the question. So much like we did with our filter context, we needed something to be provided here. So I'm going to create a new state value and call that maybe user login and set user login. That's going to be initialized to use state empty object. Why am I doing empty object? Well, because I kind of determined that this context is going to hold an object. You could do null. Null is not a bad choice either. Actually, that might be a better choice. Yeah, I think null actually makes better sense here. So I'm going to do null. Lack of existence of an object. So null will be my default. Now, instead of something here, I could pass in user login as my context value. But we need to still provide an actual value. We have a provider for our context. Actually, we don't. We have a provider now. Thank you for catching that myself. I'm sure you guys were thinking it. Nothing gets by you guys. But yeah, we need a dot provider, not just the context itself. All right, we are supplying a value, but this user login is currently null. How are we going to get that login information? Who's going to give us our login information? Ty Kavanaugh. How are we going to get actual? How are we going to actually populate this with something useful? Who's got that information for us?
I think we're going to go to the. I mean, I think it's off the event somehow, and I'm kind of lost.
Okay, that's totally fine. So yeah, we need this data from somewhere. Who's going to give us that data? Well, login page, right? Because when we logged in, we currently are sitting on some data. Where did that go? Login page. Remember, we're getting this data back from the login request, and we printed that out somewhere. When we console logged it, we saw it had that token information, that time to life, the user information, right? Everything we just saw. Whoa, that's not what I want to see. This object that we got back, this is what we're going to be using to create our item there.
So we have to use one of the hooks or the context to then connect that up.
Sort of. In this case, we're just going to use props. So similar to how we did with, remember, so app nav took in this update filter word because app nav is the one actually giving us the relevant data for the search filter. So we pass on a callback function down as a prop to our app nav, and the app nav called that function when it had some data for us. In that same way, we're going to pass something to our login page. So we'll say, we're going to do set user login. Simple enough. We have a function. Why not use it? So we'll do update user login. Set that equal to that function. Any questions on what I'm attaching here? So I'm wiring up this function, passing that down as a prop and calling it update user login to our login page. So now we go to our login page again. Our login page has a new shiny new prop that I can use. So when we successfully log in, which is this else case, in addition to navigating, actually I'm thinking of something else, and this is going to be a fun little tangent we're going to take. I think maybe I don't know. So I'm going to call props.update user login. And I could pass this entire data into that because that data is an object to start with. Can I? No, we can't. So I need to create a new object. So let's say let's user obj login obj equal. So we're going to set a user and a set user function. The user will be, what is user supposed to be? No, null. All right, I think it's going to be this object right here. So we have a user object that has email, ID, and username. That's going to be what we're going to set there. So I think I want to do data.user. And then set user is going to be, I guess, the handler function. I don't know if this is getting kind of messy, but props dot Oh, I see what's going on here. Right. So it looks like the set user was created so we could use our context here and call set user on it. I think that's, do you guys kind of follow this? So I think, let's give this a try. Import user context. All right, so we're importing user context. We're going to also import from React, import use context. I understand if you guys are a little confused here. I'm just trying to piece this together. So from React, so we're going to actually use the context and use this callback function to update a value in our context. I think that's what's going on here. So at that point, all right, let's take a look at the Readme page. So
Are you talking about because you have an error message?
no, not the error
Oh,
message.
I was gonna say you just need a comma, but
Yeah, I do need that
Right.
comment here, right? I'm a little confused what set user is going to be used for. I had a different design idea, but let's see what the Readme page is going here. So looks like handle login is going to call set user, and okay, fine with me. So, oh, I see. Okay, I think I'm piecing this together. So instead of calling this via props, we're going to call it via the context. So let's get our context here.
Hunker, that's what I was confused about. Like when Ty said you were going to grab it from the user context, that made sense to me, but then that doesn't explain why you pass the prop to the login page, because you don't need the prop if you're pulling it from the context.
You're
Does
right.
that make
Yeah.
sense?
Again, it's a little different design than I would go
You
with.
were right, Ty. Don't worry about it.
Ty's always right. Never question that. No,
I had no idea what I was doing, but.
No.
I
You got
hit
it, buddy. I got your back.
Yeah, so we're using the context to both set the value. So this was a question that came up before lunchtime. But can we actually set the value in the context? And I guess this is the way you would do it. You provide a function to do it. I'm still a little fuzzy on this, but we're going to proceed with this. So user context is the context object. We get the user login. That's an object. And the object has a method on it, I guess. So we'll do user login set user data is what we called it. I'm not quite happy with the design, but whatever. Okay, so then our value is going to need to change where. So here, where are we? This needs to change to be. It needs to have a user and a set user function. Okay, so we're initializing the value of the provider to be basically these two items, the state value and the state updating function. We're passing that as our object down. Our login page is going to use the set user function, which is effectively set user login to update the state value. I was going to do it a little different way, but I guess this achieves the same thing. So in this case, we do not need a prop down here. The context provides effectively the updating function for us. So given that, again, I don't think I've done it this way before, but maybe I didn't read the README close enough. So we call user login set user, which is coming from the context that should update our data. And then we want to navigate away. You guys with me? What questions you guys have? I feel like we took maybe a hard turn there. Again, we are using the context in our login page, grabbing the information. So that is an object. So again, if you want a reminder what the object looks like, let's go to our user context. It's going to look like this. It's going to have a user entry and a set user entry, ideally. That's what we mocked up in our app.js, where we pass down a value. That value is an object that has user and set user as entries. And finally, in our login page, we are using the set user function to pass the data. All right, you guys good? Good? Okay, and then we're navigating away. So let's actually see if this works. Okay, so let's navigate away. I'm going to go to the home page. No, I'm going to go to app nav, because that's where our next task is. So app nav, let's go back to our README just to refresh what we want to do. All the way to the top, as Tanya mentioned, we want to modify app nav to show logged in when they aren't logged in. If we don't have user data or use a login object, if it's null, then they're not logged in. If they are logged in, we want to show a logout link. So that's something we're going to do in app nav. So let's get to that. So app nav, currently we are showing a login button in every case, but now we want to conditionally show a login or logout. So here I'm going to insert a function, render log, render, what do I call this? I don't know, render login, logout, better reflect name. Give me a function. I'm going to put some logic in there. So grab that out here. Well, let's create a function because I don't want to nest some complicated logic there. So we'll create a function, const render log in, log out is what we called it. This is where I copy and pasted. It was just that link we had before for the login, but now conditionally, we need to conditionally show login if they're logged in, or if they're logged out, or if you want to show log out if they're logged in. Who can assist me on this task here? Let's go with, I feel like there's someone I haven't chatted with in a while. Anyone not chatted with me in a while that wants to chat? Adam McDonald's, you there? Not sure if he's not there or just avoiding talking to me. All right, fair enough. Let's go with anyone else want to chat? Don't be scared. All right, I'm trying to find someone. Duncan Watson, let's chat.
Pick the wrong guy. But what you
No,
got?
you got this. You got this. All right. So now instead of just always showing a login button, I want to show login or log out based on if the user is actually logged in or logged out. Do you have any idea on how we could determine if the user is logged in or logged out?
I mean, my mind goes to a ternary operator initially.
Yep.
I don't know.
So let's do a ternary operator. So let's say we have some value called logged in. Let's just imagine we have a value. Let's say that's true. And we actually need to figure out this value. Assuming we have that, we're going to return conditionally if they're logged in. Then they're logged in, we want to return a log out. So we'll do a log out. But as I'm typing this, Duncan, I do have an additional question. How do we know if they're logged in? So this value, I'm hard coding it. How do we get an appropriate value for that? Do you have any idea? Yeah, we do need a ternary here. So question mark. Sean Furlong, do you have any ideas maybe to suggest to Duncan on how we can determine if they're logged in or logged out?
So we're doing a ternary.
I'll give you guys a hint. It's something we were just working on before we did this.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
That's fine. So we were creating a user context, right? The user context, we populate that when we log in. So initially, when we're not logged in, our user values are null, right? So we initialize our user login to null. So these are just going to be null values. Sorry, this is going to be null, and then this is going to be probably undefined. No, that'll be a function. But our user login is going to be null. That is our initial value when we just create our app. But once we actually log in, everything we just wired up was that the login is going to update this to be that actual user object. So based on the existence of that user object or not, we can determine if they're logged in or not. So we're going to use the user context for that because that's where we have stored the information. So we go to app nav. Instead of, again, using a Boolean that we are hard coding, what I was doing here, log out. All right, so conditionally running a button. Want to do anything else? Yeah, I want to do something else. I want to do variant. It's going to be danger. And this variant can stay the same. All right, so again, to get this value, we need to use the context. So let's import that. Import user context from wherever, and then we should have access to it. We don't always need to grab it up here. I'm pretty sure we can just grab it in this function. So let's just do that this time. So let's say user log, let's say logged in equals use context, user context. And then again, this is going to give us an object back. We want to check the user on it and just see if that's null or not. So not equals null. Any questions on what I'm doing here? I could break this apart if you guys want me to. So let user.
What's with the danger variant?
That's a bootstrap thing. That's going to color it red. That's
Got
a green
it,
bootstrap.
thanks.
Yeah. Good question though. So we grab an object and then we can check the object. So either way, user login equal null. Let's all right. So if they're logged in, we show the logout button. If they are not logged in, we show the login button. So now this should be conditional.
Ankur, may I ask a question? I'm sorry, I know you're on a roll here. For line, I'm getting a little confused about the context here. At the very top, when you import it, you are importing that object that you made, right? That user context object that we made back when.
Yep.
Okay, so that is like that object we created that happens to be that's like when we did the whole create context thing, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Okay. And then down in the code there on line 27, use context is the function that we have to use to like get access to whatever's in that object, right?
Yep,
is that right?
absolutely.
And then I guess where I'm confused is user context. That's the object that we imported. So we're passing the object we imported into use context, and that's going to give us that object. And that's what we're assigning to user login. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. So if you go back to our diagram, effectively, the context is the cloud, and then when we pass in the cloud to use context, we get the value out of it. So again, filter context is whatever user context is the cloud we created. Use context, that function allows us to grab a value out of it. So that's effectively what's happening.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep. So again, this is our cloud. Use context is just saying, hey, I want to get the value out of the cloud, and that's the value that's spit out here. So in this case, this is an object. I'm doing .user. Again, remember what our structure looked like. .user is going to be null initially. So let's take a look at if this actually works. If I missed something, let's get rid of that. All right, refresh. All right, so notice it says login right now because we are not logged in. We started from scratch. Going to log in. Type an email. I'm going to go correct here. So john@doe.com. Password is open sesame. Let's log in. All right, we got logged in successfully. Cool. Hit OK. Notice our button changed to log out now. So this means we are logged in successfully. We have that user data, and now we can use it. However, I think the other thing we want to not show the add article button. Was that part of the requirement? I think so. So let's handle that. So instead of this stuff needs to go in that function too. This function looks kind of gross, but we'll deal with it. This is the div. Inside of that div, we'll put this stuff in. So again, if they're not logged in, they should not see the add article button. So that's for the login case. All right, we have a div because we have multiple child nodes. And there we go. Kind of a gross ternary there. Might want to, that'd be fine. All right, so login, we show both the add article and logout button. If they're not logged in, we only show the login button. So let's give that a try, refresh here. All right, so again, we don't, add article button's missing. They shouldn't be able to access that. Go to login, Do this one more time. We're gonna do this a lot. Logout.com. Open Sesame. I think we're due for a break too. Open Sesame. All right, logged in successfully. Great. All right, cool. We're logged in. Add article button is visible. Logout button is visible. All right, let's go to add article now. Cool. We can add an article. So I go to Lion King. Byline is Disney. Abstract is Lion King. That's great. All right, let's try to add an article. Oh, nothing happened. Why didn't anything happen? Oh, I still got that authorized fail. That's kind of weird because I've logged in. Why am I not authorized? I'll leave that to you guys to think about. Maybe you guys know the answer, but we're going to take a break here because we definitely deserve one. Let's take a 9-minute break and we'll be back to figure out how to actually get this working, where we can actually be authorized to add an article. All right, so we're just covering some of the work we've done already. So looking at our users API, I think Michael Chach, the question was about this object.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so you're just naming it that. Gotcha. All right. I thought when you first did it, I thought like, this is an interesting new feature, but it's just you're naming. Okay, that makes a whole lot of sense. Thank you.
Yeah, no, glad you asked. Again, always glad to clear up confusion. So please ask questions on anything that confuses us. But yeah, this is just a variable. We called it credentials object. I think the correct page as an object, just a variable that we're going to pass in. It's hopefully going to be an object so that we could stringify it and send it to our server. On our login page, I happen to call it login obj, right? Again, you know how to match the names. I don't know what the best practice there is, but probably want to match the naming, but you don't have to. So I call it login obj, pass that in. Then once we get the data back, we do some stuff with it. So we take the data and just set it using the set user function from the context. We set the entire data blob. So that object that we got, that still here. Yeah, so we set this entire object into that user context. All right, so look at our context one more time. Our user context has 2 values inside of an object. We set this value from the login page, and we set this from the app page. We make that so that we could update the user value. Again, not the way I would necessarily do it, but that's the choice, I guess, we made here. Okay, so let's continue on. If there's no more questions out there. Any other remaining questions of what we've achieved so far? Okay, so let's proceed. So we left off with the add article page. When we tried to add an article, right? We realized like at the very beginning of that we couldn't add an article because we need to log in first. Well, we're logged in here, right? Like we can see that we're logged in because I have the log out button shown. I tried to add an article and I still got the authorization failed. Well, the reason for that is because we need to prove that we are authorized. The server still doesn't know we're making an authorized request because again, the server is stateless. It doesn't remember that we've logged in. It passes a token and we're supposed to use that token to prove that we logged in before, right? So again, the server is a stateless piece of software. So, but we do have that token available. If you remember this, where'd it go? This ID value that I want to rename to token one day, that is our token that we got back from the server. So we're going to use this token that we've stored internally now in our state value or in our context and use that to get our authenticated request. So to do that, we're going to continue on the curriculum page. Where we go. All right, authenticated article submission. All right, so now we need to pass a token value to our add article API function. So if we look at our add article API function right now, if I can find it again, source API, article API, right? We have this add article API method that we added, I believe, yesterday or 2 days ago, I think yesterday. Now we want to add another parameter, and we're going to call that token. Again, just another variable name. You can name it whatever we choose. But now we're going to be supplying a token, that token that we got from the server initially when we logged in, and passing that along with our request. So now the server will like inspect our message that we're sending and say, okay, I found that your token. I validate this is a valid. I validate that this is a valid token. So I'm going to approve your request because you're proving to me that you were authenticated at some point. So now we want to add something to our headers called authorization. It must be named this. And the value for that is going to be token. All right, let's make sure that so add a new property to the header object called authorization. All right, so headers, authorization, token. If we just pass that in raw, let's see. When the API endpoint requires authorization, it's customary to provide this data via the header called authorization. Add a new property to the header object in our article function called authorization and set the value to the token argument. Okay, I think that's what we just achieved. There's a unit test. Again, no unit test, so ignore that part. Okay, so we added this to our add article function. Now we actually need to pass in a token when we are adding an article. So I go to my add article page over here. So let's take a look. All right, so this is where I'm making the API call, but we need to pass in a token as a second parameter. Let's ask your good friend, Kana. How do you have a suggestion for how we could get this token value? Do you know where that's stored, how we can access it? So we need something token here, but how do we get that?
Yeah, to be honest, my brain shut off a while ago, so
That's
I'm not sure how to do that.
But yeah, the answer here is the user context again. So if I import, right, because the user context has the data we set in it. So the user context from, I guess in this case, VS Code did not, I guess I did give it an option to. Where is it? Source, not too far. Context, there we go. / user context. All right, so we are going to use our context again. We're going to get the token right here. So I'm going to do const user login obj equals use context. We're going to need to import that if VS Code doesn't. I think it just did. User context. All right. So again, we imported it. We're passing our cloud to the use context function to get the value out of the cloud. That object has 2 values on them. I want to get the token. So assuming that we are logged in, we should probably check. Let's say let's const token equals user object, user login object. Assuming that's not null, because it could be null if we're not logged in. If it's not null, then we're going to get user login user dot ID. That looks really weird.
Ankur,
Yep.
do we need that if the add article button wouldn't appear if you weren't logged in?
Maybe not. I mean, you can still navigate to it, right? Even if you don't have a button, the user can type in /add article. I mean, we could add some additional prevention.
But
like
normally you'd have protected routes, no?
Yeah, like in Django, we had that login required decorator that prevented us. Yeah, you could do that. I'm just trying to be safe here, just in case we get into a situation where it's null. I don't want my application to crash. Like we could do something else. But yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. All right, so this is, again, really weird naming. I'm not happy with the naming we used here, but the reason I did .user.user.id is because this object has, oh, I guess I don't need ID. Sorry, I don't need to go into the user. I don't want this ID. I want this ID. Again, bad naming. Don't mean to throw anyone under the bus, but that should probably be named token, not ID. So I don't want user.user.id. I just want user.id. And that's the token that was sent to us, even though it's called ID. All right, so we get the token. If it's null, we'll just say the token's gonna be empty. That's fine. So we get the token. Token here. All right, so assuming we're logged in, we should get the user.id. Again, that is this ID right here. Great, I just lost it. Where'd it go? All right, I don't know what happened, but let's log in again. John at do.com, open sesame, login. Cool, login successfully. So again, the object is this entire thing. That's our user login, user login.user object. And then we're getting the ID off of that. It is not this user. I know it's really confusing because we have nested users and IDs. But again, this user refers to our context. I feel like I'm getting lost in this too. Where's our context? That user refers to this user value. Nothing to do with the object that was set here, which happens to have a user within that object. You guys clear here? Nah, no. I wouldn't blame you if you're lost because yeah. Anyway, but let's try to get back on track. So where were we? Add article page. So just take again, if you don't understand how we're getting a token again, user object has a user and set user as entries. The user object has another dictionary or object, and that has an ID field, which is our token. So we get the token, then we're going to pass it along to our add article call. And if you remember, our add article call takes that token, sets it as the authorization header. Again, it must be called authorization. Your variable can be called whatever you want, but this must be in your headers called authorization. So given that, again, this kind of following their guide here, let's make sure that we can actually add an article now. So I'm going to minimize this. Let's hope that we can do this. Let's do the login again. So to go to Guillermo's point, we can still get to the add article page manually if I went like this, right? Usually you want to protect that route. So we could probably redirect them to the login page if they try to go here manually. That could be an additional goal. Let's actually log in. So do john@doe.com, open Sesame. Great, logged in successfully, taken to the home page because we redirected that. Let's go to the add article page. Let's do Lion King, Disney, Lion King was a great movie. All right, let's try this. Fingers crossed. Oh, that's not good. All right, it doesn't like my use context. All right, let's debug. So that is my add article. I'm using use context here. It doesn't like that for some reason. Why does it not like that? Any ideas? So let's read the message.
So the use context, can you go back to the page? Don't we have to create a use context variable instead of just calling use context or something?
Well, we normally do this outside. So let's try doing that here. So I usually put this outside here. I don't know why that should make a difference. So we create this here and then we use it down there maybe. See if that makes a difference. All right, we're still logged in, I think. Let's just start from scratch. I don't trust this. All right, log in for the 50th time. .com. Okay. Open Sesame. Cool. All right, add article. I'm just gonna put in garbage X, Y, Z. Add article. All right, we got past that. New article is not defined. Great, more errors. So
Ankur, was that because of the scope of how you set that state because it was inside that async function? Is that why it was throwing that error?
I don't have a good explanation. It might be because we're calling it from here, so it doesn't have access to this pointer, would be my guess. Like it doesn't know where
that makes sense.
I don't know. Yeah, sorry for
doesn't know it's in there.
But yeah, usually I always just put it out here. I think in our login we happen to do it inside here. I think somewhere. Yeah, we called. No, we did it outside here. Again, yeah. Put your context outside your functions is a lesson here. I thought we could do that inside, but no. All right, add article page. All right, grab our context outside of our function. So just like we create state, create a context value up top, and then we can use our context in here, grab a token, and what else is going wrong here? So I have a bad variable here that should be response ID or data. All right, so I think this worked correctly. I just had a bad variable here from wherever that was. So let's try this one more time. See if we get to the full process. So log in, john@doe.com, open Sesame, log in. Cool, good. Add article, X, Y, Z, add article. There we go. So we were redirected to the article page because we had a navigate here. That navigate, if you remember, is a use navigate return, which comes from our router. Just kind of connecting all those dots. All right, so it looks like everything's working now. So we are providing a token to the server so that we could prove that we are authenticated or authorized to make a new article or create a new article. So we get a data response. We didn't have an error, so we proceeded to navigate to our articles, or that article that we just created, which was XYZ. So if I go back to my home page, hopefully I should see that at the bottom. We created 2 of them, I guess. So there's that one. So we did this twice. Again, we crashed when we created one successfully. We didn't navigate successfully. But there we go. We created 2 articles. I feel like there's probably a lot of headaches out there. Again, I know that was kind of a lot. We'll try to kind of wrap up on a good note here. So I think we achieved all of our objectives. Let's make sure. Let's read our README page. So authenticated article submission. We just did that. Authenticated article submission at article page. All right, that's where we're using the user context. They are doing it with the other syntax. Instead of using the use context, they are wrapping their render with user context.consumer. That's just another way to do it. All right, go through that. App nav, we already did this, so I think we jumped the gun there, but we are providing a login, logout. I think we still need to do a logout, so that's one thing we need to do, and a few last routes. So this, I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm still having some headaches migrating to version 6 of the React router, but let's try to implement this. So last thing I want to do is add a logout route. So let's go to app.js. We have a login route for a login page. Let's do a logout route. And I was trying to mess with this. I'm just going to create a logout page, which isn't necessarily what I want to do. I'm going to pass it. I guess we'd use the context for it. Let's create one more page, which is the last page for news for a new site, logout page.js. It's not going to really do much. Logout. Let's create a functional component called logout page. This will say, just keep it simple, you are now logged out. But we want to actually do some logging out. So this is where we're going to rely on the context again. So let's do this. Import user context. Let's user login info equal use context. Let's grab it into that cloud. Get our user login info. The reason we need it is because we need access to that set user function. So I'm just going to call user login info dot set user and set that to null. So basically saying that back to null resets our logged in state, because that's what we are relying on to determine if we're logged in or logged out. So our initial state is null. We use that value to determine if we get a null from our user in our context, that means we're not logged in, we are logged out. So this value will be null, meaning we're logged out. Okay, so that logout page will do that. And that's all it does, I think. Let's see if this actually works. So go to my app.js, logout page is wired up to the logout route. We need to import that. And let's see if we can log out. So log out page from log out page. Again, as I said, I'm having some transitory issues with using React Router version 6. There's probably a better way to do this. My intended goal was to just automatically log us out and redirect to the login page. That's probably better functionality rather than having a landing spot just to tell you you're logged out. But let's just kind of go with that. All right, let's see if this works. All right, refresh, let's log in. Log in, blah, 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 blah. Yep, cool. All right, we're cool. Everything looks good, works. Now we want to log out. So we're going to be taking it to /logout. We are logged out. And to signify that, notice that the button in the app nav automatically went to log in, meaning the state in our application was kind of reset. App nav automatically updated to show the login button. Cool, 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 cool. All right, I think that takes care of new site 6. Again, a lot of just practice using context, a little bit of authentication in there. We're not doing too much. We're just basically getting some data from the server. The key thing you want to remember is that token. That token is what the server sends you after you successfully log in or authenticate yourself, and then use the token to make authorized requests. In this case, we need an authorized request to create a new article. So we need to pass that token along with that request. The server is going to check to make sure that token exists and is valid before it allows us to actually create that article on the server side. Okie dokes, that's the last things we're going to be doing for the new site project. What questions do you guys have about anything?
Hey, can you quickly go over the Rendon login, logout function again?
In the app nav?
Yeah, I was kind of confused what you did there.
Sure, absolutely. We'll go over that. So first thing we did, we are going to be using the context to get some data. Oh, this is where I'm using use context. Interesting. I'm going to pull this out just to be consistent. So we have states. We have our context data, context. All right, so here we are grabbing that cloud. In this case, the cloud is user context. Use context will pull the data out. In that case, we're storing an object inside that cloud. Again, just a reminder what that object looks like one more time. It looks like something like this. So that object's holding onto an object that has 2 entries, user and set user. So app nav, user login object. Now we're just basically determining whether the user's logged in or not. That's a Boolean value. So in this case, we're going to check user login object, and just check if that user value is null or not. Like, we don't care about the token in there. We don't care about their username. Like, we could show their username and say, hey, welcome Dan Miller, if you're logged in as Dan Miller. But in this case, we're just saying true or false, are you logged in? We don't care about anything else in that user object. Based on that, we render conditionally. So if we're logged in, we want to show the add article button right here. And then we also want to show the logout button. Otherwise, we just show them the login button because that's all they can do. What other questions do you guys have? Questions? Did I burn your brains?
I don't
Okay.
really have a question, Ankur. I just want to say thank you. I know this stuff's definitely not easy to learn and definitely not easy to teach. As a former teacher, I really appreciate you guys. Thank you.
I mean, yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, but again, I'll say, like, telling myself we have it easy. Like, yeah, it's harder to digest the material than deliver it. I mean, it can be challenging to deliver it also. Obviously, you want to make it delivered in a manner that can be digestible, but it's still a lot. Again, you guys are gonna do this new site 6 yourself, so that would probably make a lot more sense when you guys are doing it. We just want to give you a run through of all the steps you got to go through. But yeah, let me stop the recording here.